I wanted to do a record of all different kinds of things I've been fooling around with, more than just artwork of projects that are never going to see the light of day that I want to share. We're making a new book that would be a follow-up to a previous book we released in 2020 that was called Alex Ross Unseen, which include a lot of paintings and sketches of things that otherwise wouldn't have been seen, that of all different kinds of properties. Now I thought I could put together a bunch of stuff that were either pitches that didn't go anywhere or development on projects that just didn't get off the ground. And in some case, fooling around with things that I never intended to pitch, but I wanted to draw out and sort of get it out of my head and onto paper. And so when I put it into a book like this, it's kind of a sketchbook form of sharing thoughts. Now I've had years worth going back, decades of things that never saw the light of day, and I've held on to them thinking, well, I don't want to share my ideas in case somebody steals it. Well, I'm not really worried about that anymore, and I might never pursue some of these creative outlets, but why not put them out into something that I could just sort of walk people through the entertainment of, hey, here's a crazy thing you never knew I spent time with. And it might be a single illustration, or in some cases, it's a whole load of stuff on a subject that, again, never went anywhere, but there was a lot of thought building into it. Probably the single goofiest thing that people will see in my Unseen book is my articulating what if Jack Kirby had drawn Batman in 1970, which sounds stupid in the way of like, is this a question anybody's been asking or haunted by? And I don't know why it's something that's bugged through my brain, because there's been plenty of artists influenced by Jack's work who have drawn the character. So that's nothing new. But to play with the idea of in a what if of sorts, where if he was handed something from DC when he leapt from Marvel to DC, and they didn't have Neil Adams leading the sort of charge of the new look for the character, and they were coming off of the TV show era, which went from the highest peak, the most popular thing in the world, to suddenly everybody thought of this character as a joke, that DC Comics could have said, Jack, we need your help to make it cool like what you did over at Marvel. Sky's the limit, do whatever you want, recreate this concept as you wish. And so I wanted to articulate that, and it just had a lot of inspiration that kept compounding, and I was redesigning not just his approach to the way he might have interpreted Batman's villains, but also Batman's very look, his costume. I was putting in the idea of these heavy blacks that would occupy his work, as on projects he did in the early 70s, like the Demon series. I did mock-ups of a sort of imitation cover, an imitation logo done by the way that Jack's art style of the 70s looked when he had a certain lettering style that would often follow him from project to project. I created concepts for characters that he might have invented, as in Batman's world is very much crime, that Kirby had a particular obsession with street-level crime, particularly of his youth, and so putting some of that element in there, from like a Bonnie and Clyde influence to, you know, mobster influences, putting some of that in. Generally, the Alex Ross style of doing Batman has been a mixture of trying to find a middle ground between Neil Adams' realism and the history of the big, wide Dick Sprang Batman of the 1950s. That style was something I was always obsessed with since childhood, whenever I saw reprints of it. So I could have been doing just a straight interpretation of Neil's version, because I was raised on that too. But I thought if I could hybrid the two, and then I came out with my overstuffed Batman that everybody has seen over the years and told me how fat he looks. Jack's influence might have been knowing what the character had been for the years he had been in the industry and thinking of that Dick Sprang style. And if he wasn't trying to imitate what Neil Adams had done, he might have been bringing in some of his own influences of like, well, this is what I know this character to be, and I'm going to make him dark and cool, but in his own way. So he has a lot of the same instincts that Adams brought, but he doesn't go for the overlong ears. He looks like he's really restyling Dick Sprang's Batman for a more aggressive age. And this is something you would see reflected in the art styles that Frank Miller brought to Batman in the late 80s with the Dark Knight Returns project, and even Bruce Timm in the 90s when he would draw various stories that he did a lot of these inking embellishments with Batman's figure that would seem very much taken from Kirby's hand. So there's a lot of Kirby that's been cast upon the character before, but Jack himself has no great history drawing this hero. There's not a ton of his own interpretation of it, and the most he ever did was in the 80s when he did a Superpowers series that's more tied to the toy line than it is to do with any personal interpretation of the character. So I think if you got Jack at arguably his peak when he was working on stuff for DC in the early 70s, in that era where he was trying to build his own kingdom of stuff that was exclusively his, if he took this thing in there and it was under his wing, he might have given it this passion that I can only speculate on. And that's what was fun, is speculating what would a great man have done with this stuff and giving an interpretation that's purely subjective to my fandom of thinking, hey, wouldn't it be cool if Jack thought of this?